It took exactly 47 seconds for the room to shift from routine oversight to palpable incredulity. Cameras flashed, pens hovered mid-scribble, and every eye in the Senate Judiciary hearing tracked the man whose resume had just been labeled the least qualified FBI director in history. The air, already dense with expectation, seemed to compress around him, pressing against the polished mahogany tables and the cold, fluorescent lights overhead. Senators filed in with measured pace, their footsteps echoing softly off marble floors. Nameplates clicked into position, microphones crackled with static, and assistants discreetly adjusted the official pads of paper, shuffling documents with deliberate care. Jasmine Crockett took her seat in the center of the panel, her posture rigid, the weight of the accusation she was about to make already imprinted in the slight furrow of her brow. Around her, colleagues whispered muted greetings, eyes flicking toward the door as Kash Patel entered, his expression composed but taut. The director's presence demanded attention, but the tension in the room suggested that respect was still provisional, contingent upon the next 60 minutes. Patel's dossier lay before him, neatly organized, color-coded tabs marking prior statements, legal references, and intelligence memos. Every page carried the weight of federal oversight, each line scrutinized for accuracy and legality. The senator's collective gaze drifted over him, a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. Fluorescent light reflected sharply off the gold rim of his glasses, creating brief, staccato sparks across the panel's notes. Crockett adjusted the microphone. Her voice, calm and precise, cut through the quiet hum of air-conditioning units. "Mr. Patel," she began, "we are here to discuss your tenure as acting director of the FBI. Our responsibility is not personal, it is constitutional." She allowed the words to hang, giving the weight of the chamber time to settle. Around the room, pens stopped mid-motion, eyes fixed, subtle tremors of anticipation moving through staff and senators alike. The camera tracked every micro-expression. Patel's fingers drummed lightly against the table, the rhythm betraying a flicker of tension he could not fully suppress. His jaw tightened once, then relaxed, betraying both calculation and anxiety. The session was about to begin, a collision of legal scrutiny and political theater. On the wall behind Crockett, a framed copy of the Constitution cast a quiet reminder. Every official in the room was bound by its clauses, by the statutes that governed intelligence oversight, and by the public trust. Flashes of camera lights reflected off mahogany surfaces. A page rustled audibly as an aide made last-minute corrections to the hearing agenda. The room's temperature seemed artificially low, the chill sharpening the sense of anticipation. Every detail, from the click of a pen to the faint scratch of a gavel, contributed to the atmosphere, the beginning of a confrontation that promised to be as legally revealing as it was emotionally tense. And then, the softest of gestures, a senior senator leaned forward, pen poised over notes, eyes narrowing slightly. It was a signal that the procedural formalities were over, that the real questioning, the search for both truth and accountability, was about to begin. The silence wasn't over yet. The room held its breath as Jasmine Crockett's gaze swept across the table, settling on Kash Patel with the precision of a prosecutor and the restraint of a seasoned legislator. Her voice was measured, almost conversational, yet each word carried the weight of statutory authority. "Director Patel," she began, "when you assumed your duties as acting director, did you conduct a formal review of the ongoing FISA Section 702 surveillance approvals?" Patel's fingers paused mid-tap. He adjusted his notes, flipping the tab marked 702 compliance. "Senator," he replied, voice steady but tight, "my office maintains all requisite documentation. I personally reviewed the high-level memos concerning ongoing surveillance activities." His words were carefully chosen, yet the tension in his jaw betrayed a flicker of uncertainty. A pen clicked sharply in front of Crockett. "High-level memos," she repeated, tilting her head. "Are these the same memos the Inspector General cited in their 2023 report for incomplete chain-of-approval documentation?" The question was precise, legal, and public record verifiable. Silence fell for 2 seconds, long enough for the microphones to pick up every intake of breath. Patel's fingers grazed his notes again, a subtle tremor betraying his hesitation. Another senator interjected, a quiet but firm voice. Director, under the Appropriations Act of 2022, Section 12, any redirection of intelligence funds must be pre-approved by both the DOJ and congressional oversight committees. Were any such redirections undertaken during your tenure without that approval? Patel shifted slightly in his chair, the microphone picking up the rustle of his papers. Not to my knowledge, Senator. All funds were processed according to standard protocol, he said, though the brief hesitation suggested room for doubt. Crockett leaned forward, the camera capturing the micro-expression, narrowed eyes, a fractionally raised eyebrow. And yet, she said softly, almost conversationally, internal communications from your deputy suggest that a classified operations budget was adjusted on June 14th, without documented congressional notification. Can you clarify why these communications conflict with your statement? Patel blinked rapidly, fingers now hovering over his notes rather than gripping them. The air was heavy, punctuated only by the scratch of pens and the faint hum of the overhead lights. Senator, he said finally, voice slightly rising, I believe that action was within the discretion granted under the Federal Vacancies Reform Act and internal DOJ guidelines. He paused. I can provide follow-up documentation to reconcile any discrepancies. The senators exchanged subtle glances. Crockett's tone shifted imperceptibly, precise and probing. Follow-up documentation is not the same as immediate accountability. Under the Due Process Clause of the Fifth Amendment, American civil liberties are contingent upon strict compliance with statutory oversight. How do you justify any delay in informing congressional oversight when liberties could have been affected? Patel swallowed, exhaled slowly, and allowed his gaze to drift briefly toward the chamber ceiling. The subtle quiver of his hand over the notes betrayed a fissure of confidence. Cameras clicked relentlessly, capturing every twitch of expression. Behind him, staffers scribbled furiously, trying to maintain the rhythm of the hearing. The dialogue continued, each question a scalpel dissecting both competence and legality. Eye contact shifted, pens hovered mid-air, and the room's collective focus sharpened into a tense choreography of legal scrutiny. Every hesitation, every minor contradiction, was now being catalogued, not just by cameras, but by history. Finally, Crockett's calm, deliberate tone cut through the lingering tension. Director Patel, one more question before we proceed. Were all FBI intelligence directives under your authority fully compliant with the statutory requirements of both the National Security Act and FISA 702? Patel's lips parted, then paused. The soft click of the gavel signaled the chamber's attention. The room, thick with anticipation, knew the answer could tilt the hearing irreversibly. The silence wasn't over yet. The room seemed to contract, every polished surface reflecting tension back onto itself. Kash Patel's calm veneer began to show hairline cracks. Jasmine Crockett's next question, quiet but unyielding, sliced through the static-filled air. Director Patel, can you explain why a June 2023 internal memo shows conflicting timelines regarding the surveillance of domestic networks under Section 702 authority? Patel's fingers paused over the neatly organized tabs. His eyes darted toward the memo, then back to Crockett. Senator, those memos reflect preliminary assessments. Any discrepancies were clerical, not substantive, he said, a carefully measured cadence trying to mask the tremor in his right hand. The senior senator to Crockett's left, a man known for exacting precision, interjected. Preliminary or not, Mr. Patel, federal law is explicit. FISA Section 702 requires accurate and timely reporting to congressional oversight. Failure to do so, regardless of intent, violates both statutory requirements and internal DOJ protocols. Can you confirm compliance? Patel swallowed, adjusting his notes. All directives were intended to remain within compliance, he said. Yet the pause, almost imperceptible, was picked up by the cameras and by the sharp eyes of the Senate clerks. Crockett's gaze shifted to the wider table. And yet, she said, drawing out the words, an internal audit flagged 3 separate instances where classified operations budgets were shifted without documented approval. Section 12 of the Appropriations Act is clear. Such action without immediate notification constitutes a violation of federal law. She let the silence linger, allowing every syllable to echo through the chamber. A subtle flash of movement. Patel's hand twitched over a memo labeled Classified Operations, June 2023. The camera caught it. He cleared his throat. Senator, those actions were taken under discretionary authority delegated to the office. No harm was intended. An internal review followed standard protocol. Crockett's tone sharpened. Intent does not nullify statutory obligation. Violations of appropriations oversight can trigger both administrative sanctions and civil consequences. Further, your office's delayed notification compromised the due process protections guaranteed under the Fifth Amendment. The room held its collective breath. Pens hovered, assistants scribbled furiously, and the fluorescent lights seemed colder, harsher. Microphones picked up every minor intake of breath, every shift of posture. Patel's eyes flicked to the side, then down, scanning the memos, searching for any line that could anchor him. Another senator leaned forward. Director, can you reconcile the discrepancy between your stated approval of FISA Section 702 directives and internal emails indicating missed supervisory sign-offs? Patel's jaw tightened. The camera zoomed subtly, capturing the shift. The once confident director now confronted by the tangible weight of memos, internal reports, and legal statutes. His voice, when it came, was measured but slightly brittle. Senator, the office acknowledges those gaps, but they were procedural, not substantive. I can submit clarifying documentation. Crockett's pen hovered, scratching lightly against the notepad, reflecting the room's rhythm. Every pause, every hesitation a drumbeat of escalation. Procedural or not, she said softly, you are ultimately accountable. These are not abstract notions. They are statutory mandates under FISA, the Appropriations Act, and the internal DOJ compliance guidelines. Even clerical errors in such contexts carry constitutional and institutional weight. Patel's shoulders stiffened. The subtle flicker of doubt in his eyes betrayed the mounting pressure. The cameras caught it all. The trembling hands, the flash of hesitation, the micro-expression that suggested the first fracture in authority. A gavel tapped lightly, almost imperceptibly. A senior senator's voice cut through the thickening tension. Director Patel, it appears we are approaching a moment where legal and institutional failure may converge. The silence wasn't over yet. The chamber felt impossibly small, the fluorescent lights glaring like interrogators themselves. Every camera lens, every notebook, every polished surface seemed to magnify Kash Patel's mounting unease. The moment had arrived, the precise intersection of legal scrutiny and human fragility, and it would last exactly 4 to 7 seconds. Jasmine Crockett leaned forward, voice calm but unyielding. Director Patel, under the Federal Vacancies Reform Act and the Department of Justice guidelines, are you able to cite a single instance in which your office fully complied with the statutory requirement for timely congressional notification on classified surveillance adjustments? Patel froze. His eyes darted to the thick stack of memos before him, then back to the panel. Fingers hovering, he opened his mouth, closed it, and tried again. Senator, the office. His voice cracked ever so slightly. The pen in his hand trembled. The microphone captured the faint scratch as it dragged across the notepad. Crockett allowed the silence to stretch. 4 to 2 seconds passed. Cameras captured every micro-expression, the subtle twitch of Patel's jaw, the tight flare of his nostrils, the flicker of doubt in his eyes. Behind him, aides exchanged anxious glances, pens suspended mid-note. The air smelled faintly of polished wood and recycled ventilation, but to everyone present it seemed charged with the weight of impending revelation. Finally, Patel stammered, I believe compliance was maintained. His voice faltered, breaking under the pressure. He fumbled for notes, flipping through the memos as if answers could be summoned from the paper itself. A bead of sweat formed at his temple, the first visible crack in the facade of control. Crockett's tone remained serene, mercilessly precise. Director, the Inspector General's audit, dated March 2024, explicitly cites unapproved redirections of intelligence funds and incomplete FISA Section 702 oversight. You are, by law, accountable for these lapses. Can you deny that this constitutes a violation of statutory oversight and a breach of due process protections? Patel's hands shook now, sliding papers back and forth in desperation. He swallowed hard. Senator, I thought, but no coherent justification followed. 4 to 7 seconds, the exact measure of professional collapse. His inability to articulate legal authority, to cite statutory compliance, left the room suspended in disbelief. For the first time, the tension in the room became physical, almost tactile. Pens stopped mid-scratch. Microphones seemed to hum with expectation, and the senators leaned forward, eyes narrowing, voices silent but commanding. A junior aide gasped softly, hand pressed to mouth, witnessing the unraveling of authority in real time. Crockett's calm eyes met Patel's. Director Patel, the failure here is not rhetorical, it is codified. Violating due process, neglecting FISA oversight, and disregarding appropriations law is fatal to the integrity of this office. Public trust, statutory compliance, and institutional stability are all compromised. The room exhaled collectively. 4 to 7 seconds had compressed an entire tenure into a tableau of legal failure. Patel slumped slightly. His authority evaporated in the glaring light under the relentless gaze of law, process, and the press that would later replay the moment endlessly. Cinematic detail captured the fallout, the shimmer of a gold pen falling from Patel's grasp, the reflection of a ceiling light on polished mahogany, the subtle shake of a hand resting on legal documents. Every camera, every note, every tiny motion was a record of collapse. And as the gavel tapped lightly, signaling procedural pause, the chamber understood it had witnessed something irreversible. Not merely a lapse in competence, but a concrete breach of statutory duty, etched into the public record. The silence wasn't over yet. By evening, the story had erupted across every major news network. Television anchors spoke in clipped, precise tones, replaying the 4 to 7 second sequence of collapse with slow-motion emphasis on every micro-expression, every tremor, every halting word. Constitutional scholars called it the most devastating Senate takedown since Watergate, intoned one anchor, the screen behind her flashing the image of Patel's faltering hands over a stack of memos. For 47 seconds, America watched competence collapse. Social media churned with clips of the hearing, hashtags multiplying within minutes. Legal analysts dissected the sequence, highlighting violations of FISA Section 702 oversight, breaches of Appropriations Act requirements, and failure to uphold due process under the Fifth Amendment. Headlines splashed across the web: FBI director fumbles oversight, public trust shaken, congressional accountability meets a career in 47 seconds. Inside Capitol Hill, aides whispered in hallways, copying memos and scheduling emergency briefings. Senior senators called backroom meetings, reviewing both public footage and classified documentation. This isn't merely political theater, one veteran senator muttered, flipping through the Inspector General's report. The statutory lapses are real. This is the kind of failure that institutionalizes distrust. Across the country, legal scholars weighed in. Dr. Elaine Porter, a constitutional law professor, commented on CNN, "The due process clause is not abstract. It requires procedural fidelity." The director's inability to reconcile internal memos with statutory obligations is not merely embarrassing. It is legally significant. It signals a breach of public trust that could have cascading implications for intelligence oversight. Political pundits joined in, some dissecting party alignment, others focusing on institutional integrity. "The optics are disastrous," said one anchor, gesturing toward the clip of Patel hesitating mid-response. But the legal consequences could be even more significant. Congressional oversight is not symbolic, it is mandated by statute. Any failure undermines both the FBI's authority and the legislative checks designed to prevent overreach. Public opinion fractured along lines of expectation and trust. Town halls filled with citizens asking pointed questions about FBI accountability and director qualifications. Editorial boards debated whether the failure reflected personal incompetence, systemic weakness, or both. The day's coverage was relentless. Static microphones, repeated flashes of cameras, and live tweets detailing each nuance of the hearing. Back inside the Capitol, whispers of a pending DOJ review began to circulate. Staffers scurried, double-checking memos, verifying signatures, and preparing statements. Senators issued carefully worded public remarks, balancing condemnation with procedural restraint. One aide observed, "This isn't over. There's a ripple effect. Investigations, follow-ups, and accountability measures are imminent. The fallout is only beginning." The visual record of Patel's falter, the trembling hands, the shifting papers, the hesitant voice, was seared into national consciousness. Every frame, every angle, every second of hesitation was analyzed in both legal journals and mainstream media. In the press room, journalists murmured over live footage, noting the alignment between statutory lapses and personal indecision. And yet, amidst the chaos, a quiet, almost imperceptible tension lingered in the Senate corridors. Analysts, reporters, and staffers alike understood the deeper truth. The collapse was more than personal failure. It was a cautionary tale about the fragility of institutional oversight and the heavy weight of public trust. An anonymous source within the DOJ hinted at upcoming inquiries, the first step toward an official review. The gavel tapped softly in an empty hearing room, echoing as if marking the transition from spectacle to consequence. The silence wasn't over yet. The chamber was empty now, the echoes of questions, pens, and gavel taps fading into a hushed resonance. Polished mahogany tables gleamed under the same fluorescent lights that had witnessed 4 to 7 seconds of collapse. Microphones sat silent, dust motes drifting lazily in the shafts of light. The room, once a theater of confrontation, had become a space for reflection, a monument to accountability, law, and human fallibility. Jasmine Crockett's posture lingered in memory, upright, precise, a figure of controlled moral authority. Her questions had been calm, deliberate, rooted in statutes, not spectacle. FISA Section 702, the Appropriations Act, the Fifth Amendment, each legal reference had been deployed with surgical clarity, exposing gaps not in theory but in execution. In that room, the law had not merely been cited. It had been enacted as a force of accountability, uncompromising and impartial. Outside, the cameras had stopped flashing, but the story persisted. Analysts continued to dissect the implications. The public debated the balance of competence and trust, and the DOJ quietly prepared its review. Yet in the quiet of the chamber, the lesson was more philosophical than procedural. Public institutions, no matter how venerable, rely not on intent alone but on fidelity to the laws and processes designed to preserve trust. The human element, hesitation, uncertainty, misjudgment, could ripple through the structure of governance with devastating speed. Patel's fall, compressed into less than a minute, was now historical, but its meaning extended far beyond him. It was a demonstration of the fragility of authority when divorced from legal rigor. Senators, staffers, and the observers of history would remember the interplay of law and human limitation, the stark clarity of procedural oversight, and the precise mechanics by which public trust can be both safeguarded and eroded. In quiet moments, Crockett's voice and questions lingered, a reminder that governance is not abstract, that each clause, each approval, each memo is tethered to both the Constitution and the citizens it protects. And while public memory would replay flashes of hesitation, trembling hands, and halting words, the deeper imprint was institutional. Systems, statutes, and safeguards that transcend the individuals who serve within them. The chamber's light remained cold, yet steady, reflecting the ongoing imperative of the law. Accountability is rarely instantaneous, yet it is inexorable. Careers may rise and fall in minutes, but institutions endure through codified diligence, adherence to procedure, and the unwavering attention of those charged with oversight. And as the cameras pulled away, Capturing the empty hearing room one last time, a quiet truth settled. Some careers end in scandal. His ended in silence. Washington doesn't punish ignorance. It replaces it. The final shimmer of fluorescent light danced across polished mahogany. The gavel's echo lingered in memory. The silence was complete.